I'm your host Pensyfan19 and welcome to the March 2021 Pensyfan Periodical. This is a monthly news series which covers most of the major railroading headlines from around the world, as well as my opinions on them. We have a lot of articles to go over today, once again the most this series has ever had, so with this in mind, let's get rolling. First off, might as well continue a similar fashion where the last Pensyfan Periodical left off, since Amtrak is bringing back the night owl. There's a developing trend among numerous passenger operators for bringing back night trains, in which passengers can sleep on board and wake up at their destinations. After such proposals in Europe, it now seems that Amtrak is following this movement as they're reintroducing overnight service on the Northeast Regional between Washington DC and Boston for the first time since 2003 with the Twilight Shoreliner. Starting April 5th, a few days after this video was uploaded, Amtrak will be offering private sleeping rooms for trains 65, 66, and 67 on Viewliners as more of them are entering service. Although sleeper service is nothing new on Amtrak in general, with sleeper cars being used for long distance routes, it is a new and interesting concept to have sleeper service on inner city routes, especially on Amtrak's most frequently used and profitable service. This also raises the possibility for other sleeper options on other inner city routes, such as the Pennsylvania from New York to Pittsburgh, the Empire service from New York to Niagara Falls, or even West Coast routes, such as the Cascades from Eugene, Oregon to Vancouver, or the Pacific Surfliner from San Diego to San Luis Obispo. The possibilities are almost endless for this overnight service as they can be applied for both intercity and long-distance service anywhere throughout the nation, while providing the luxuries of the sleeper car and a private room. As someone who has been on the Viewliner 2 times in the past, they provide a great and comfy experience for long distances and overnight travel with comfy beds, and is fantastic on any route it's assigned to, which would now include the Northeast Regional, so I'm definitely excited to see these sleepers go into service on inner city routes and continue this trend of overnight service. Speaking of service introductions, SNCF is to reintroduce their locomotive haulage services after phasing them out in 2020. The Long Island Railroad reintroduced their original timetable as they revoked their temporary reduced schedule. Railrunner has started service again for the first time in a year due to the pandemic. The state of Virginia is to dedicate almost $4 billion to improve rail service, which includes purchasing the abandoned CSX S-Line for passenger service, although I am a bit spooked by that VRE Genesis locomotive in the concept art. Ontario Northland ran a test passenger train from Cochrane to North Bay for the first time since 2012, possibly hinting at a return in passenger service on the route. Aberdeen, Carolina and Western has restored 4 SD4-2s and 2 MP15s. Sentinel Locomotive N has completed its overhaul. Lyon has inaugurated their T2 extension. The European Union is to run a Connecting Europe Express to show the benefits of rail travel. A Minnesota lawmaker has proposed counties in Minnesota to join South Dakota. Home Depot to support more rail shipments to their stores. Stadler is to produce Circumvesuviana EMUs for EAV in Italy. And Renfe is to receive new train sets from both Stadler and Alstom, with the latter company producing the Extrapolis, which oddly has a double-deck coach in the middle of the set. Speaking of which, here's some interesting news. Iowa Pacific is placing all of their equipment for sale, ranging from E8s and F40s to passenger cars for anywhere between $20,000 and $90,000, with the only steam locomotive on the list, LS9 number 18, having already been sold to the Colbrookdale Railroad for excursion service. Meanwhile, that same railroad is to have sensory-friendly rides for those with sensory sensitives. Go Transit is to test autonomous systems. Trains Magazine and Luckin Productions are to produce an EMD documentary for their 100th anniversary in 2022. A neighborhood in Buffalo is to recognize the transport of flour by rail. A loose tarp has knocked over the Laramie, Wyoming rail cam, while flatbeds have been spotted on the top of containers and empty container cars. Roblox is now available on the New York Stock Exchange. The Gulf of Mexico is to receive 2 new rail ferries for CG Railways. LA Metro has used NYC Subway R160s in their concept art for the proposed Sepulveda Pass Transit Corridor. Metrolink is using retired F59PHs for work trains, which includes a caboose. And EMD is to make 16 SC70AC LW variants for Mongolia on another name which I'm not going to attempt to pronounce. I must say, this locomotive looks like it's a kit bash with the body of an SD70ACE and the cab of a Pacific National 92 class from Australia. I know that's a GE locomotive, but still. In other news, Alstom has acquired a Dutch maintenance firm Shunter. That's literally the name of the company, Shunter. Hector Rail has converted one of their electric locomotives to run on water. Musself and RTB Cargo are sharing a Trax locomotive. A missing DSB Victron has reappeared in Germany. Renfe is to take 50% stake in Czech open access operator Leo Express as part of an internationalization strategy. France is seeking UNESCO status for the baguette. Rail Charter Services is to make a green intercity 125 set. Eversholt Rail is to convert Class 321 multiple units for freight service. A Freightliner Class 70 and 66 have pulled the heaviest recorded train on the West Coast Main Line with a grand total of 39 rail cars. GB Railfreight 66793 is now a heritage unit for rail freight distribution, while the fundraiser has started to repaint a Class 142 into a Valley Lines livery. Marble Run is on display at South London. HS2 is using retired wind turbine blades for reinforced concrete. A cat delayed an Avanti West Coast train by sitting on its roof. And Virgin is suing Brightline for ending their licensing brand, specifically for Brightline saying that Virgin Group ceased to constitute a brand of international high repute, largely because of matters related to the pandemic. I'm not sure where this lawsuit is going, since Brightline just said they feel that Virgin isn't a good company, especially seeing how they were doing for the past few years, which I feel is an opinion on their part, since others may say that Virgin is a good brand. My opinion on this matter is that Virgin is welcome to start any private passenger service in the US if they can run it well, and shouldn't sue another company based on their opinion. In the meantime, we also have big news in the model railroading community related to a topic previously mentioned in an old Pensyfan periodical. MTH assets have now been acquired by Atlas, as they just purchased their O-gauge stock in addition to HO gauge. To go over this major event, I have brought in model railroad expert and my good friend, Captain Echo. Take it away!
Thanks, Pensyfan. Hello all, Captain Echo here, your guest speaker, and here is some breaking news within the model railroading community. Atlas Model Railroading, who's more known for their HO scale and N scale models, has acquired MTH's O scale assets and tooling. Atlas already has a small variety of O scale stuff, from early EMDs, some Alcos, a good number of rolling stock, and some scenery. Some of the new things that will come from Atlas will be modern freight equipment, cabooses, passenger cars, EMDs, GEs, early EMDs, more scenery, and sound systems. Jared Heydrich, I really hope I'm pronouncing that right, sorry for butchering it, the COO of Atlas stated, "The MTH has long been an outstanding manufacturer of model trains, and we are excited to continue that legacy. MTH will officially be closing in May. Sad to see you go, MTH. You will be missed." And that's all I have. Back to you in the studio, Pensyfan.
Thanks for the great review, Captain. Can't wait to see what Atlas has in store for model railroading. But alas, we have the sad news. Canadian National has stored most of their remaining GMD-1s. Proposed cuts for DC Metro could cut service for 22 stations. The Honolulu Rail Transit project will likely take another decade to fully complete. At least Phase 1 is opening later this year. Hydrogen has been rejected as an alternative fuel source for GO Transit. MBTA has sidelined their CRRC Orange Line cars after a derailment in an area which caused 6 derailments for the new cars. MG Tower in Altoona is facing demolition. New York Susquehanna and Western is to abandon the Passaic and Lodi branches. Amtrak Cascades Talgo 6 sets have been scrapped after being transported to Anaheim, California. LNER 91-132 City of Durham, a locomotive which survived both the Hatfield and Great Head wrecks, is the first British Rail Class 91 to be scrapped. Metra E8s 521 and 516, two E units which visited the LIRR in the early 1990s, have been the latest locomotives to be scrapped as part of National Rail Equipment's Silvis, Illinois plant shutdown, and M3s have been retired from the LIRR as their inspections are up and are currently stored, awaiting scrapping. Now here's a follow-up news section for articles covering stories from previous episodes. First off, we have a lot of follow-up news for Amtrak with negotiations with the STB for Gulf Coast service. Amtrak has also commented on Maristar Rail's proposal for private service on the Northeast Corridor. Amtrak is to restore all of their long-distance services to Dailey on May 24th, 31st, and June 7th, which would also be supported by the proposed legislation to create permanent funding for Amtrak at $5.4 billion, although 40% of that goes towards the Northeast Corridor, and photos have been released of ALC-42s being constructed. I feel like I'm missing something about Amtrak though. I don't know what, maybe it was something else about the ALC-42 or something like that, but I don't know what. Oh yeah, Amtrak Heritage Units. Absolutely incredible liveries to represent the 50th anniversary for Amtrak, and it's especially surprising to see that Genesis locomotives are receiving these liveries since they're supposed to be replaced by the Charger soon. So up first, we have a brand new livery known as Midnight Blue, representing all overnight services, followed by the Phase 6 livery on the Genesis. It just looks a bit odd to have a reverse heritage unit, so to speak, in which the present livery is on the former locomotive. We also have the present-day Phase 5 livery currently on Amtrak 46, a Pepsi can livery originally used on the Dash 8s, very surprising to see this unique livery on the Genesis, another Phase 1 Genesis, which somehow isn't a repainted 156, and lastly, the only ALC 42 in this list, a nearly identical livery used by E8 number 4316 for Amtrak's first day in service. Perfect choice for the 50th anniversary of Amtrak, with Bachmann already making an 8-show gauge model for this particular heritage unit. Additionally, Amtrak has also released concept art for a Phase 7 livery for their Siemens Chargers, only months after the Phase 6. I'm not sure if that means Amtrak is skipping Phase 6 since it's technically used for their coaches, or if the Phase 6 we saw from August will only be applied for a few locomotives instead of the whole fleet, but only time will tell. Amtrak has stated that Phase 7 is supposed to be more effective for wearability. Based on the back of this livery, I'm concerned if the Siemens Venture coaches, which these Chargers will eventually pull, will just be plain, or have some sort of design to them, but again, these questions will likely be answered in the coming years. The only reason why all of this isn't the top story is that it's following up to Amtrak's announcement of the Phase 6 livery for their ALC 42s back in August. Meanwhile, life is getting back to normal as the MBTA is to restore their services to pre-pandemic levels. The two Class 69s are to be repainted in a GB Railfreight livery in mid-April. Fox Rail's Vectron has been named Emma as it arrived on the rail's property. Another British Rail pacer has been donated to a school, this time 144008 to the Fagley Primary School as a science lab. Watco is to acquire ex-Wisconsin Central lines from Canadian National, including the Algoma Central. The CSX acquisition of Pan Am has been delayed by the STB due to objections from nearby railroads. CDOT 6711 has started testing on the Hartford line, while the very light rail vehicle has started testing in Dudley. And the Tennessee Pass Revival has been rejected by the STB, since it still needs a thorough review. At least the possibility of reviewing it again is still out there. Up next is the station upgrades portion for proposals, constructions, and openings of stations around the world. Starting off this section, we have Northern Rail, which is to renovate over 30 of their stations, followed by openings for Kidbrook, Acton, Sheffield, Catania Airport, and Tulse Hill. On the other hand, work still continues for Maidstone, Merseyside, Riga International Airport, Perry Barr and Birmingham University, Temple Quarter and St. Philip's Marsh, Vilnius, University of Washington, and Kangasala. The last two were just featured on Wikipedia and did not have any upgrades, but I decided to mention them here since they're stations. In other news, Siemens has revealed their official designs for the London Underground 2024 stock, which will replace the 1973 stock on the Piccadilly line. FA has revealed their CRRC multiple units. Kenya Railways is to take over passenger services from Afristar, while Philippine National Railways has terminated its contract with CRRC for new DMUs. WLC has repainted a Bombardier tracks into their new livery. CD Voostrons have entered passenger service, while NS has placed their Vectrons into service with a new variant of the classic blue and yellow. Although something about this design is a bit unsatisfying, specifically with one side having more blue than the other. On the other hand, Lancaster Chester 8782 has been repainted into the railroad's completely black livery, while Tacoma Rail 1526 has been repainted into their railroad's red, white, and black livery. Temp Streetcars received their first Brookville LRV, while Espon has received the last of their Alstom Class 490s. A study is considering converting Milwaukee Road 261 to run on oil instead of coal. The WWF in Maine is to construct a 3-engine roundhouse, while newly restored Baltimore and Ohio EA number 51 has been moved to a permanent display at the B&O Rail Museum. The North Carolina Railway Museum is seeking funds to save 10 of their rail cars. Union Pacific 4141 has arrived at the Bush Library and Museum, and the Sierra Northern Railway is to purchase hydrogen-powered switchers. The design looks pretty good, and if it looks familiar, it should, since it's being rebuilt from the Rail Power PR20BD. After all that, it is now time for this month's Meme of the Month. This month's Meme of the Month is the demise of streetcars. And now, the top story of the March 2021 Pensyfan periodical is Canadian Pacific acquires Kansas City Southern. How can this not be the top story of the month? Canadian Pacific's American empire grows again as it is planning to acquire the smallest of the 7 North American Class 1s. With this acquisition for $29 billion, CP Rail will be the first railroad in history to have service in Canada, the US, and Mexico, since its acquisition will also include KCS-M and possibly the KCS-owned Panama Canal Railway in Panama. With 1 of the 2 railroads providing service to the southern border of the US, this is the largest acquisition between the 2 Class 1 since Canadian National acquiring Illinois Central in 1999. On a side note, the thumbnail for the September 2020 Pensyfan periodical happened to predict this very acquisition with a CP Cheap and a KCS Givo on the bottom right, as one of the stories mentioned included a private firm trying to purchase KCS. Yet this acquisition is not immediate since it has to be approved by the STB and the KCS board, but this is likely going to be approved in the coming months. With this acquisition, many rail fans in the region, as well as myself to an extent, are a bit upset to see their home railroad being taken over by CP Rail, especially considering the somewhat long history of the road since 1887. Although it is sad to see Kansas City Southern go, it will be very interesting for what services and rail fanning opportunities will form power this merger of the 2 historical Class 1s will have to offer, as many are feeling optimistic with the merger of these 2 reliable railroads. With such a major acquisition, surely nothing could stop the store. What now? Amtrak unveiled a new map suggesting new corridors? Well, let me see. Oh. Well then. It looks like we have 2 top stories for this periodical. Talk about an unexpected 1-year anniversary treat. So there are a lot of light blue lines in this map representing new services, mainly consisting of proposed route expansions which Amtrak mentioned over the years. This includes already known service introductions such as the Gold Coast Limited, Atlanta to Nashville, and Detroit to Toronto, along with increased frequencies between cities such as Toledo and Buffalo, Boston and Albany, and LA to Tucson, as well as a lot of smaller branches such as expansions to Asheville and Wilmington, North Carolina, Green Bay and Madison, Wisconsin, Reading and Allentown, Pennsylvania, Concord, New Hampshire. Wait a minute. Does that say Ronkonkoma? Amtrak's own Ronkonkoma? This is absolutely fantastic news as a Long Island rail fanner. I am absolutely hyped to see this happen. I remember hearing about 2 years ago Amtrak proposing service from Long Island to DC or Albany, but I didn't hear any news of it until now. So, despite the absolute glory of this map, I feel that there are still areas to improve servicing, such as in the further west with routes such as the Pioneer or the North Coast Limited, more routes to isolated regions in the west and south, and maybe connecting some of the cities mentioned such as Louisville, Nashville, and Scranton or Allentown and West Buffalo. But this can be accomplished at a later date if necessary. Also, some of the routes listed are in direct competition with some of the proposed private passenger railroads, so I'm not sure if having Amtrak service next to a proposed privately owned passenger route is as good of an idea. But it's still good to see these routes considered in the proposal. I must say, this is the most beautiful map I've seen in my life, and it can be made possible sometime in the near future from the billions of dollars of dedicated funding from a rail-based US government. America's getting back into training, and I can't wait to see rail transport in the US thrive into the future. Thank you everyone for watching this month's episode of the Pensyfan Periodical. There have been a lot of rail news headlines for the month, and it will be very interesting to see what the future has in store for all of these articles. Thank you again for watching. Credit for most of the photos used go to their original photographers. And don't forget to like the video and subscribe for more. Have a good day.